speaker Vincent here. Welcome to the show. Today I'm here with Neil Williams from Logical Coaching.
That's it.
Neil, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Neil, we've just sat in on a training session here down in Sydney, and it was great that you flew down to do this session today, and we were talking about tenders.
Yeah.
Can you just give us a little bit of an insight into tenders, the process, and why you feel that they'd be a great way to market a property?
Yeah, be happy to, Greg. The tenders have been around for a long time, particularly in the commercial world. Commercial property's been sold by tender for a long time. We out there talking with a lot of clients, talking with vendors, a lot of them like the auction process, but there are some that have concerns about it. They're uncomfortable about some of the stress levels. It's all public, everything's out there on display. So we looked at it and we said, look, there's got to be a better way to do it, I suppose, for the want of a better word. Auctions offer, and I'm an auctioneer, so auctions offer clients three really great advantages. One, nobody can ever walk in the property and say it's too dear. It doesn't have a price on it, so that they can't say it's too dear. Two, buyers can't walk through and compare it with any other property that's on the marketplace at any particular point in time. They can't say, look, the one down the road's on 700, therefore this one's too dear compared to the one down the road. And thirdly, and most importantly, it allows them to become emotionally attached to the property without having it clouded by price. We've all seen things in our lifetime and we said, gee, I'd love to have that, then we've turned the tag over and seen the price and we've discounted it and said, look, we can't afford it, so it's not for us. So they're the three benefits that auctions offer people. When we spoke to vendors, we said, what don't you like about auctions? We went through quite an exhaustive process with them, and one of the things that they raised was, well, there were three major ones. The first one was the stress, the level of stress attached to the whole process, the build-up leading to auction day, the fear that nobody would bid or that there would be only one bidder, and that really worked away at them, and they were really concerned about that. We said, okay, we understand that. Secondly, that the highest bid at an auction will only ever be driven by the underbid. So it's not uncommon to have two buyers, and I'm sure the viewers will understand this, that have different perceptions of price on a property. I might be selling a home that I believe is worth around about $600,000, but it has a studio in the backyard. So, to a buyer that needs a studio, they'll pay a higher price than the person that wants a 4-bedroom home, doesn't really need the studio, but they'll turn up the auction and bid on it. So on auction day, the perception of one of the buyers that doesn't really need the studio might be worth $550,000, and the other buyer's perception could be $600,000, and that's just an example. So on auction day, what we call the underbidder, the person that would go to $550,000, that buyer pulls up at $550,000. Now the buyer that got out of bed that morning that said, okay, I'm off to an auction, if I've got to go to $600,000, that's where I'll go to, because I need to have that studio from my home office point of view, so there's commercial advantages to it. They will then go along, but they only have to beat the underbidder. So if the underbidder pulls up at $550,000, the other guy only has to go to $555,000. It could be
$551.
Yeah, $551. Yeah, it could be passed into them, and then they negotiate afterwards with the vendor. The difficulty is though that the vendor never knows what they would have gone to. So from a negotiation perspective, their power base is huge for the guy that it was passed into, or the buyer that it was passed into. He'll never mention that he was ever going to go to 600. He'll then sit down, talk with the agent, look at 555, I think that's a great price, all the things that buyers say, and we can all understand that. So the important thing is that to recognise that the highest bid will only ever be driven by that underbid, the one that comes in underneath that. And thirdly, another thing that the vendors were a little bit unhappy with was that the property may well be worth $600,000 in the current market. But if only one person's turned up at the auction and their opening bid is $500,000, and then there's perhaps a vendor's bid of $540,000, $550,000, that buyer then only has to go $551,000 again. The process starts again and it's passed in. Now, if the vendor doesn't want to accept that figure because it's too low, they say, look, we're going to bring it on the market at a price. Let's put it on the market next Saturday at $600,000. It appears in the paper. Everybody that was at the auction says, $600,000. I went to the auction, it was passed in at $551,000. They now want $49,000 more than the highest bid at the auction. So they were three of the major areas. So then we looked at where selling by tender has a benefit over an auction. The process is exactly the same. You have a 3 or 4 week lead-in period, marketing period, but instead of having the auction at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning with all the neighbours, etc., turn up, friends and family, and bidders, the buyers have to submit their offer on a signed contract with the tender documents, sealed envelope in a sealed and locked tender box. So it's a formal process. It's not playing one off against the other or anything else. Everybody gets exactly the same chance to be able to purchase. So if we look at the problems, the perceived problems that we had before with auction, first one being that that people have to king hit it. When the tender guy, or the tender vendor, sorry, opens up those envelopes, the highest figure should reflect that $600,000 for the guy that wanted the studio, and the bottom one at $550 becomes irrelevant. It doesn't matter, because in this instance, the guy that really wanted it didn't know who he had to beat.
Yeah.
He had to come in.
What he had to do.
Yeah. He had to come in with his best shot and say, okay, here it is. From the buyer's perspective, he hasn't paid anything more than he wanted to. He's secure with the property he wanted, and he's totally happy with that. The second one is that humiliation factor. And we've all experienced it. I've auctioned my own property, and there's no bigger fear than we get of on the day of the auction that nobody's going to turn up, or that someone will turn up and only make one bid. Because we all know from our own particular circumstances, having sold before, the day we put the house on the market, we think everybody's going to be queuing up to buy it, and that on the auction day we're going to get 30 or 40 spirited bidders who'll drive it through, the price right up and above. And that does happen.
Yeah, it's funny. I heard years ago that the day of the auction, or the night before the auction, sellers have a dream that busloads of people will turn up to the auction and it goes crazy.
Yep.
And the buyers have a different dream that no one turns up and they get the place for a steal.
Correct.
So,
and that, I mean, it does happen though. I've had some fantastic auctions and that we've really got really great results, but it's all dependent on that underbid. Now, if you've been through that process of all of your friends, all of your neighbours have said, yep, it'll sell, don't worry, it'll sell, and for whatever reason, and not because of anything the agent's done, there may not just be a buyer on the day that can buy the property unconditionally. So there's buyers there that want to buy it, but they can't do it. So then the buyer's been through the process of getting their emotions up to here and their hopes up to there, and then by 11:05, sadly, the things haven't worked out the way that they wanted it, yeah.
And so with the tender process, it's something we were talking about earlier, that it doesn't necessarily, because I always thought that, okay, tenders come in on, it's got to be in by 10 o'clock on this particular day, and then the best one, they basically secure it. And it's almost like you think, oh, well, you've just got to accept whatever they give.
No, not at all.
And so can you just sort of cover off on a couple of those myths around that, that not only that it doesn't have to go on that particular day, and you don't have to accept whatever they give.
No, it's a formal process. And this is the thing that gives vendors confidence, the fact that it is a formal process. It's important that the agent explains that to them. It's not just playing one off against the other or anything else. I mean, that's not fair. This is a formal process where all the people that are interested in buying the property play by the same rules. The rules are laid down on the tender document that accompanies the contract. It's very simple. It's not in legalese. It's a very, very simple document, but it discloses the conditions under which the tender will be conducted. One of those is that the vendor reserves the right to close tenders early, if they wish. They might have 4 tenders in the box. Tenders are due to close on the Saturday, and they decide to close it early on the Tuesday afternoon. That's their decision. That's why they will always be in control of that. There'll be no pressure from the agent about doing one thing, doing the other thing. It's totally up to them and how they handle it. The other thing is that they can accept a tender if they're just one prior to the tender's closing. So a buyer might wish to place a tender. The tenders don't close for another weekend, and the buyer says, look, I don't want to wait. Can I place a tender now? Of course you can. That will be placed with the vendor on the signed contract. If the vendor wants to accept it, so be it. The whole process stops. Every buyer and the marketing reflects the fact that the tender has that right to close it early, or they do have the right to accept an offer prior to the tender close date. So once again, it leaves the tender in total control without any pressure from any external sources. The other thing is that they don't have to take the highest of the tenders. It's totally up to them. They sit down, let's assume there's 3 tenders in the tender box. They will sit down in the comfort of their own home. We can take the tenders to them. If they wish, some vendors like to come to the office, sit down in the office and do it. They'll sit down, they'll open each and every tender, they'll look at it. Some of them may be conditional. That's one of the benefits also of tender. You could put in a conditional contract if you wish. But they'll sit down, they'll consider them all. If one of them is of a suitable figure and they're happy with that, they can sign the contract and the deal is done. They can sit there and relax. Often they'll look at the agent and they'll say, what do you think I should do? The agent should always, in every instance, say that decision is yours and yours alone. I'm not here to shove any recommendation down your throat. This whole process is about you picking the figure. If it's suitable, that suits you, sign the contract, the deal's done. If not, if it's not enough money, that's fine. Sometimes there's not. And so, I've had sometimes there's been nothing in the tender box. That happens. I don't want to project this thing that it's a foolproof system, but the vendor will always be in control, and this stress thing is paramount to them. That they can sit there and just say, okay, we need to consider it for half an hour. That's fine. We want to talk about it as a family. No problem.
But it's a nice private way of doing it as well, and it's interesting when you said about being able to bring it forward, and how it worked with that property that you sold down in Canberra, where everyone else sort of felt that it was about 1.3. Even valuations were done around 1.3, and then you had that buyer came in and said, "Oh, we want to submit it early," and it was 1.8.
Yeah, $1.8 million.
$500,000 difference.
Yeah.
If that was an auction, how could they get to 1.8?
When after we sold it early, we rang the other people who were interested in putting tenders, who initially, I must say, were a little bit upset that they didn't get a chance to have their tender open. But we'd run it through with the buyers, we'd spoken to them, and they were happy with us to let the other people know what it sold for. And they said, I wouldn't have gone anywhere near that. They were basing all of the prices that they were going to submit on the valuations that they had done, because it was hard price to house to price, sorry. And they had, I think there were 4 valuations done on it, of which the highest was 1.4. There were a couple and the rest were 1.3. So the buyer wanted it. That was the house for them. To them, it was worth $1.8 million. I don't believe they paid over the market. They were, once again, the buyer was in total control from how much their offer was, what the level of their offer was, and place that they secured the property. They're happy, and as far as I know, they're still living there. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's got the benefit of having the same thing with an auction, that there's no price ceiling.
Yep.
So there's an option where people can go, you can have that sort of experience. I mean, it's not to say it's going to happen every time. It's just there is that opportunity.
Yeah, well, the last time I sold my home, I sold it at tender. I had been through, agents have to sell their own properties, and it's no easier for us than it is for vendors. But I previously sold my other house at auction, and it wasn't a good experience from where I sat. And I was the agent, and my business partner was doing the auction outside. It was a tough old market in Canberra at the time. It was depressed, and it was particularly an unpleasant process for my wife, who, like most vendors, expected to get a higher figure than where the auction was at. And after that, she said to me, never again. She said, that's it. She said, don't you ever.
Take me through that.
As
again.
I said, I was an auctioneer at the time. So next time that I sold at tender. I sold my next property at tender, which was about 8 years later. I sat with my wife and we worked through the process. She was comfortable with the tenders because she'd seen them, us working with them in the marketplace. To take all of the blarney out of it, for the want of a better word, I had an independent valuation done for sale. That figure came in at $750,000, and Diana said to me, "I'm more than happy with that. If we could get $750,000, I'd be happy with that." So we took it to tender. The tenders were due to close on the Saturday, and one of my team I had selling it came around and saw us on the Friday night, and he said, "There's been a purchaser that wants to submit a tender prior to tomorrow." Now, that was fortunate because the next day there may have only been one other tender coming in that he anticipated. It was a particularly different house to sell. Anyway, I said, that's fine. So my wife sat down, opened the envelope, and it had $850,000 written on it, unconditional.
Wow.
So, to get $80,000 more.
It's like, and the winner is.
Yeah. And it was good. But mind, there was only the one, but it's all we needed. And that one had the king hit it and pay what they thought it was worth. They didn't have an opportunity to work out what other people would be doing.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah. I just, I would not now sell my own property in the other way.
And also, I mean, if it doesn't happen to sell under the tender process and you get to the deadline, you can then go back out into the marketplace and go, okay, well, let's put it out there at a price. So you haven't lost anything because you're not in a situation where you go, like you said earlier, where it was a failed auction and then we're putting out at a price. None of it's been disclosed to the rest of the market. So
it's still private. It's still private. Nobody knows. The people a week later are no better off the buyers, and we're working for the sellers. So the buyers are no better off the week later when they're trying to work out how to play it. And then when the vendor comes on the market at a price, it's coming to the market almost fresh.
Yeah, it's like you're relaunching.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's
because nobody knows what those previous figures were.
Yeah, that really makes sense because if you can go through that process and see if you can extract the most out of there, without a price, and then all of a sudden, okay, that doesn't work. You don't attract the best buyer out there in the marketplace under that scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
You can then go down with the other strategy.
Yeah. And the feedback from most vendors post tenders closing and post successful result has been that it did give us all the benefits of an auction. It was a controlled process. There was a 4-week lead up into it, and it got us a great result, the result that we wanted. But the thing they really love about it was it took away all the things that they don't like about auctions, which is the stress, the fact that the highest bid will only be ever driven by the underbidder, and sadly the humiliation factor if it doesn't sell, and their privacy was assured. And if we do recognise the fact, and few can argue against it, that it is the second or third most stressful thing that we do, if you can make that process as smooth and as comfortable as possible, well, I mean, you've got to be on a winner for everybody.
No, that's great. Neil, I really appreciate what you've shared here, and if anyone wants to get in touch with us in relation to the tender process, just contact me and more than happy to run through it. Fabulous session today.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. All right. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. We'll see you next time.